I stood in the corner of the room, watching them, the celebration of their 40th anniversary unfolding before me like a sickening spectacle. My mother, all smiles, clutched Dad's arm, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Monica, as always, hovered by their side. Her laughter too loud, too false. No one saw it coming. Not the truth I was about to drop. Not the weight of the secret I'd been carrying for years. I stepped forward, my breath steady, my hands surprisingly calm. "I have something for you," I said, my voice slicing through the murmur of conversations. The room went silent, the air thick with tension as I pulled out the envelope. It wasn't just paper, it was the end of the lies they'd wrapped themselves in for decades. My father's face turned pale when he saw what I held. "What's this?" His voice wavered. Betraying him in front of all the guests. I didn't answer immediately, letting the silence linger, making them feel the weight of their own guilt. Then I spoke again. Quieter this time. "It's the truth you've been hiding from me for years." My mother flinched, her smile fading into something colder, more calculating. I watched their faces, the panic rising in their eyes as they realized their carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. "You thought I wouldn't find out," I continued. "But I did. And now, I'm making sure you can't hide from it any longer." The finality in my voice left no room for excuses. No room for their lies to breathe. I handed the envelope to my father. And as he slowly opened it, I could almost hear his heart racing. This was it. The truth had arrived. And it was too late to take it back. I grew up in a home where I always felt like an afterthought. Monica, my older sister, was the golden child. She was the one everyone praised. The one who was always getting attention. My parents never hid their preference for her. And I was left in the shadows. "Why can't you be more like Monica?" my mother would say, her words cutting deeper every time. It felt like no matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up. Monica's birthday parties were extravagant. Huge cakes, expensive gifts, and a whole crowd of people celebrating her. My own birthdays were quieter, simpler. A cake, 4 people at the table, and that was it. My parents never made a big deal out of it. Never put in the effort like they did for Monica. I learned to accept that. But it still stung every year when I saw how little effort was put into my special day. But then there was Grandma Margaret. She was the only one who ever saw me. Every Sunday, she'd invite me over and we'd sit together, talking about life, about everything that mattered to me. "You're special, Nicole," she'd say. And for the first time, I began to believe it. She never compared me to Monica. She loved me for who I was. And that made all the difference. Monica, on the other hand, could do no wrong. She was always the center of attention, always getting the best of everything. I couldn't help but feel like the invisible one. She never had to work for approval. It was handed to her. Just because she existed. I was the one who had to prove myself. The one who felt like I never quite belonged. Monica's life was full of sparkles and smiles, while mine was quiet and unnoticed. But Grandma Margaret never treated me that way. Every time I was with her, I felt seen. She would always tell me, "You're the one I believe in, Nicole." And that meant everything to me. She was the only one who understood. She was the only one who ever made me feel like I mattered. Growing up in that house, surrounded by the shadows of Monica's perfection, was hard. My parents' constant comparisons to her left me feeling like I was nothing. They'd say things like, "Monica would never do that," or, "Why can't you be more like Monica?" It was impossible not to internalize it. I began to believe that maybe I wasn't worth the love they gave her. And I wasn't worth fighting for. But Grandma Margaret, with her simple words, gave me a different perspective. She saw me in a way no one else did. And though I didn't fully understand it at the time, I knew she believed in me. That was the only thing that kept me going in a family that constantly made me feel invisible. Grandma Margaret passed away on a Tuesday morning. Just as I was heading to my calculus class, my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I saw my mother's text, "Grandma's gone. Come home." There was no apology. No concern for how I might be feeling. Just instructions. I rushed home. But when I walked through the door, it was as if nothing had changed. Monica was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and my mom was on the phone, making funeral arrangements, while my father was nowhere to be found. The funeral was 4 days later. Monica showed up 30 minutes late, her face flushed from the traffic. Mom immediately went to her side, offering comfort. "Poor Monica. So stressed from the drive," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. I stood there, alone, beside the casket. No one asked how I was doing. No one cared to comfort me. The tears that had been building up finally spilled over, but I wiped them away quickly. I had learned to keep my emotions hidden. After the funeral, I overheard my parents in the kitchen. I was standing in the hallway, just out of sight, and their voices drifted to me. "The lawyer called," my dad said, his voice low and serious. "There's a problem with the will." Mom's voice shifted, sharp and demanding. What kind of problem? I couldn't make out everything, but I heard enough. "I'll handle it," Dad replied, and there was a finality in his tone that made my stomach churn. They didn't want me to know, and that much was clear. I didn't ask what was going on. I was too afraid of stirring things up, too scared of being labeled as ungrateful. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Grandma had left me everything she had told me that, and now I was hearing strange things. Why hadn't they mentioned this problem with the will before? Why had they been so secretive? As much as I tried to dismiss it, a sense of dread took root inside me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. 2 weeks later, I volunteered to clean out Grandma's apartment. My mom said she was too tired, and Monica had other plans. I was alone, and I needed to do it. I started in the living room, packing away books and old photos. Her scent lavender and old paper lingered in the air. I was holding back tears when I found it. Tucked inside the worn copy of Little Women was a small envelope with my name written in Grandma's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The note inside read, "Nicole, my darling girl, I've left you everything I have. Attorney Patterson has all the documents. Don't trust anyone else, especially your mother. I love you more than you'll ever know." I read it again, and then again, letting the words sink in. Grandma had left me everything. She hadn't left anything for Mom. She had warned me. My chest tightened as the weight of the message hit me. For years, I had been told that Grandma had nothing, that she lived simply, that she had no savings. But now, I knew the truth. I tucked the note into my pocket, my mind racing with questions. Why hadn't anyone told me? Why had they kept this from me? What had they done to hide it? I went to find my mother, feeling the cold weight of the truth beginning to settle in. She was sitting on the couch, watching TV, and when I asked her about Grandma's will, her answer was dismissive. "Your grandmother barely had anything." Sweetheart, what little she had went to the funeral, but I knew she was lying. I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. She didn't even look up when she spoke to me. But I didn't have the proof yet. I had the note, but I didn't know how to confront her with just that. I kept quiet, afraid of what might happen if I pushed too hard. But the truth was already starting to unravel, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. I knew my mother was lying, but I had no proof to confront her yet. A week passed, and I couldn't get that letter from Grandma out of my head. Don't trust anyone else, especially your mother. Her words echoed in my mind as I paced around my room, wondering what exactly I was supposed to do next. The following afternoon, I found myself standing in the kitchen, my hands trembling as I reached for the letter. I had already made up my mind I was going to confront her. When I walked into the living room, my mom was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Mom, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice low but firm. She didn't look up. "What now?" "Nicole?" she muttered, clearly uninterested. I walked over to her, holding out the letter from Grandma. "You said Grandma didn't leave me anything, but this says otherwise. Why didn't you tell me about this?" I could see the shift in her eyes before she even spoke. She knew I was close to the truth. Her expression hardened, and she set the magazine down. "Your grandmother was confused, Nicole. She didn't know what she was writing." The calmness in her voice was unsettling, but I wasn't buying it. "This is her handwriting. She wasn't confused," I said, stepping closer. "You're lying to me." Her eyes narrowed, her hand twitching as if she wanted to snatch the letter from me. But she stayed still. "You really think I'm lying to you, Nicole?" Her voice was cold now, with a sharp edge. "What would you expect me to say? Your grandmother was sick. She didn't know what she was doing." I felt my heart racing as the anger bubbled up inside me. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I stepped back, my eyes never leaving hers. "I know what this is," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I know what you've done." I pulled the envelope out of my pocket, opening it carefully. My hands were steady now, filled with purpose. The documents inside were the proof I needed: the bank records, the will, the transfer of money into their account right after Grandma died. Every transaction was there, clear as day. "Page 1, I said, flipping it open and showing her the first document. "Here's where the money went. Here's where Grandma's money went. Straight into your account." Her face went white, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped, as if the words were stuck in her throat. "This isn't real, Nicole," she finally said, her voice shaky. "You can't prove anything." I didn't hesitate. "Page 2, I said calmly, showing her the notarized copy of Grandma's will. "It clearly states I'm the sole beneficiary. You stole from me." I watched her face crumple in disbelief, her hands shaking as she grabbed the papers from my hands. "This isn't what it looks like," she whispered, almost pleading. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "You took what wasn't yours, and I want it back." The words felt heavy in the air. The truth was finally out, and I wasn't going to let her make excuses anymore. Her face turned from pale to red with anger. "You're accusing me of stealing? After everything I've done for you?" Her voice rose, sharp and bitter. But I wasn't afraid anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of everything that had been hidden for so long. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm and clear. "You didn't do anything for me, Mom. You took from me. And now, you'll have to face the consequences." I turned and walked away, the weight of my decision settling in. It was done. I had the truth now, and there was no turning back. The anger I had been holding in for so long finally found a purpose. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. It wasn't just about the money, it was about everything they had taken from me. The life they denied me. The love they refused to give. the trust they destroyed. But now, I had the power, and I was ready to make them face the consequences. I called Chloe. She was the only person who understood, who saw me as more than just the quiet daughter, the one who'd been left behind. When I told her everything, she was quiet for a long moment. And then she said, "You're not just going to sit back and let them win, are you?" I could hear the determination in her voice. And it gave me the strength to make a plan. "We're going to get everything back." I told her, "We'll trace their every move. I need to know exactly what they've done." The next few days were spent gathering everything: documents, bank records, anything that could prove my parents had stolen from me. Chloe worked her magic, digging through every account, every transaction. She was relentless. And I watched as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. My parents thought they had gotten away with it. But they hadn't counted on me being this determined. They hadn't counted on me being smarter than they ever gave me credit for. I knew it wasn't enough to just have the evidence. I needed to make them pay. I needed them to feel the weight of their betrayal, to know that their lies had caught up with them. I called the lawyer who had handled Grandma's will, and together, we crafted a plan. The evidence was solid. I was ready to confront them with the truth. 2 weeks later, I stood in my living room, preparing for what was about to come. My parents had no idea what was coming their way. They thought they were coming to my house for a casual visit, just like any other family gathering. But this wasn't just any visit. This was the moment everything would change. When my parents arrived, I didn't greet them with the usual smile. I didn't pretend everything was fine. They stepped inside, expecting a warm welcome. But instead, I led them to the living room, where the documents were waiting. "Sit down," I said. "We need to talk." My father looked confused, and my mother's smile faltered. But they obeyed. I could feel the tension building in the air. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "Do you want to explain this to me?" I asked, holding up the folder filled with evidence. My father's face paled, but he didn't speak. "It's all here: bank statements, the transfer of funds, the house you bought for Monica. You took my inheritance." My voice was steady, but inside, I could feel the anger boiling over. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the years of neglect. The years of being invisible to them. My mother's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. "Nicole, you don't understand," she began. But I cut her off. "No, I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been lying to me for years, and I'm done letting you get away with it." The room was silent, the weight of the truth hanging in the air. My parents had no more excuses. The evidence was irrefutable, and this time, they were going to have to face the consequences of their actions. The air in my living room was thick with tension as I watched my parents settle into the couch, unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. They smiled at me, thinking this would be a normal visit. Just another family gathering. The usual pleasantries. The small talk. All of it felt so out of place now. I had waited for this moment, planned it meticulously. And now, it was finally here. I stood in front of them, a calmness in my voice that felt almost foreign to me. "We need to talk," I said, not waiting for them to respond. My mother's smile faltered, and my father's eyes narrowed. But they remained silent. I didn't give them a chance to speak. "Do you remember what happened to Grandma's money?" I asked. And immediately, I saw the change in their expressions. The smile on my mother's face was gone, replaced by something darker, more guarded. "You've been lying to me for years," I continued, my voice steady. I could feel the weight of the truth in my chest, pressing down. "But I wouldn't back down now. I know you took it. The inheritance. You thought I wouldn't find out. But I did. My father shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to my mother. But neither of them spoke. It didn't matter anymore. I had the proof. I walked over to the table and pulled out the folder. Here it is, I said, holding up the bank records. The transfer papers. The will. This is everything. You can't deny it. My mother's face went pale, and my father's jaw clenched. He looked at the papers for a moment before turning his gaze back to me. Nicole, you don't understand, he began, his voice shaky. We did what was best for the family. If you nod. No, I interrupted, cutting him off. You didn't do what was best for anyone but yourselves. You stole from me, from Grandma's wishes. You used the money for Monica's house. You used it to buy her a future while mine was taken from me. My heart pounded in my chest as I felt the truth flow through me. I had been silenced for too long. But now, the words were coming out with a force I couldn't stop. Mom's eyes welled up with tears, but her voice remained cold. You don't understand. Nicole, we didn't have a choice. Your grandmother's money wasn't going to change anything for you. She reached for the papers, trying to take them from my hands. But I stepped back. No. Mom, I said firmly, my voice low but firm. This is mine, and I'm not going to let you take it from me anymore. 25. My father stood up suddenly, his face flushed with anger. You're being ridiculous, he snapped. This is all just a misunderstanding. He tried to grab the papers from my hands, but I held them out of his reach. It's not a misunderstanding, I said, standing my ground. It's the truth, and you're going to face it. You took everything from me, and now I'm making sure you can't get away with it. Monica had been quiet up until this point, watching from the corner of the room. She stood up, her voice trembling with anger. You have no right to do this. Nicole, she said, her eyes narrow with disdain. That house was a gift. Don't make this about you. The words stung, but I wasn't going to let her gaslight me anymore. It's always been about me. Monica, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I just didn't know it until now. The room was silent, the weight of the truth settling over all of us. My parents stood there, not knowing what to say. And for the first time, I saw them for what they were: selfish, deceitful, and afraid of being caught. But they had been caught. They could no longer hide behind their lies. You've got 30 days, I said coldly, my voice unwavering. 30 days to leave me alone. After that, any contact will be reported to the authorities. My father's face turned red, and he opened his mouth to argue. But I wasn't finished. This is over, I said. You've taken enough from me. 18-0. As I walked away, leaving them speechless in the living room, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The weight that had been hanging over me for years had finally been lifted. There was nothing left to hide. And for the first time in my life, I could finally breathe. The truth had won. I sat in my living room, the silence heavy in the air, knowing that everything had changed. The confrontation had been the breaking point, the moment I had been waiting for. And now I could finally breathe without the weight of the past crushing me. The chaos that followed didn't matter. The truth was out. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. It wasn't about winning, it was about reclaiming what had always been mine. Chloe called me later that evening, her voice soft but filled with pride. You did it. Nicole, you're free. I couldn't help but smile. It's over, I said quietly, staring out the window. It really is. They can't hurt me anymore. The freedom I felt wasn't just about the inheritance or the confrontation, it was about finally letting go of the fear, the guilt, the years of wondering if I was ever enough. I had done it on my own, without anyone's help. The next few days were a blur of phone calls. Messages from family members who were either shocked or angry at what had transpired. I didn't care. They weren't the ones who had lived through it. They weren't the ones who had been forced to play second fiddle for so long. The only person's opinion that mattered now was mine. And I knew I had made the right choice. I didn't hear from my parents after the confrontation. At first, I worried they might try to manipulate me again. But they didn't. They knew the truth had come out, and that there was no going back. I moved forward with my life, focusing on my career, on building something that was truly mine, with no strings attached. I wasn't running away from the past, but I wasn't letting it define me either. Months passed, and while the wounds still stung, I realized that healing had begun. I'd finally stopped waiting for them to see my worth. I had learned to see it myself. Every day I walked a little taller, felt a little stronger. The truth had set me free, but it was my strength that would keep me free. One evening, as I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to give me approval. I wasn't waiting for a family that had never cared for me in the way I deserved. I had built my own life, one step at a time, and it was mine to keep. In that moment, I realized something important. The greatest revenge was not what I had done to my parents, but what I had done for myself. I had taken control. I had freed myself from the chains they had wrapped around me for years. And for the first time, I could finally say that I was at peace. The doorbell rang, breaking my thoughts. It was Aunt Helen, a comforting presence. As always. "How are you?" she asked, walking in with a warm smile. "Better than I've ever been," I said. And as I said it, I realized it was true.